What's up, everyone? Today we're here with Darius Tenorio, who's a D1 at the UOP Dugoni School of Dentistry. We're going to learn a little bit about his journey to dental school and his experience as a first year during COVID. Thanks for being here today, Darius.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you having me on. I'm stoked to talk about this and my experience at UOP.
Awesome. So could you just start off with giving us a brief description about where you're from originally, where you went to undergrad, what your major was, and if you took a gap year?
Definitely. So, born and raised in the Bay Area. I'm originally from the South Bay Peninsula area. And so I always kind of wanted to come back, but I knew for college I wanted to get out of town. So, I went to University of San Diego, had an incredible 4 years there. I joined a fraternity, played club water polo, was part of the pre-dental club, and I majored in biology and I minored in chemistry. And I had a fun time doing research and surfing and enjoying San Diego for all it had. And then I applied to dental school back in 2017 and didn't get in anywhere. So I kind of took the next few years between when I applied in 2017 and now to kind of like reevaluate my application and kind of figure out where I wanted to go from there. One of the first things I did actually was I went to the IDEA conference. It's like a pre-dental, or it was like a IDEA Go Dental event in Long Beach. And basically I went to all the different dental school booths, asked, how could I improve my application for dental school? And most of them said pretty genuinely, you need to improve your DAT and you need to improve your GPA, and then bolster yourself as a well-rounded applicant, more extracurriculars, volunteer, etc. And so I ended up kind of taking a break for a little bit. I worked in biotech in San Diego for a year. And then I was kind of looking for an outlet to kind of prepare myself a little bit more academically at a graduate level. And I found a master's in science in global medicine at USC. It's a 1 year program down in Los Angeles. And I applied, it got into it. And it was super awesome because I basically was taking the first year curriculum that the medical students took at the Keck School of Medicine. So I really got to kind of like get a test run for what it's like to be in professional course load. And then I took a bunch of other disease and global health related courses, which were super awesome and helped prepare me as well. And so after that, I spent about 3.5 months right when I graduated studying for the DAT. And that's when I essentially did DAT Bootcamp. I'm sure you and many other people know about it. I think DAT Bootcamp is top notch. Like, I had an awesome time. Not only I love the videos and everything that kind of made it more helpful, because I had been out of school for about at least been out of undergrad for 1 or 2 years at that point. So I definitely needed a refresher on Gen Chem, OChem, et cetera. And that really helped me out to give me that strong DAT score.
Very cool. And
And
I
then I
think,
worked.
oh, excuse me, I was
Oh,
just gonna
go
say
ahead. Go ahead.
that master's probably has like you said, it was if it was the first year of dental school curriculum, that has to be especially important for Dugoni, right? Because you guys are cramming in so much information that first year. So I'm sure this year had to be a little bit easier for you compared to other, Dugoni down first years.
Yeah, I think that it played a huge role in how I've been doing so far in school because, you know, the best way to get involved in learning material is by reinforcing it. And so because I had already kind of learned it once, one and a half years ago, I felt like a lot of it, even though it wasn't super fresh, when I saw it, kind of jogged my memory again of like what it's supposed to be. So it definitely made learning the material a lot easier compared to if I had just been learning it the first time. So I was super grateful in the long run that I had done that program before coming here because, like you said, it's super quick, 3 year program. So they throw a ton into the furnace into getting you ready didactic wise. Yeah. So that's
Awesome.
kind of like my little roll into dentistry and how I got here.
Awesome. So after those gap years, when you became a more well-rounded applicant, did you get into other schools as well in addition to Dugoni?
Yeah, I got into another school in Southern California, another school in the Midwest.
Awesome.
And I interviewed at, schools all over the United States. And I had I always had a really good time at the interview days because after, not getting in the first time, I was just so excited to be in that situation.
Mhm.
And I thought that it was an awesome experience. And I really hope that all pre-dental students get to have that because it's fun not only to be able to travel, but meet other pre-dental students and network a little bit that way. But yeah, I think that that program and the DAT, while also doing more shadowing and volunteer work, really helped bolster my application the second time as opposed to the first time.
Mhm. So, you touched upon the DAT a little bit, how you used boot camp. Um, do you have any other tips for pre-dance? Like, how was your schedule when you were studying for it, and like, what was your mentality going through it?
So I consider myself very privileged because I chose not to work while I was studying for my exam, and I know that's a common factor for a lot of kids. It's balancing that work study schedule. But I basically tried to treat it like a full time job. I woke up at 8, started studying. I go to coffee shops all over LA and get the work done. And on the weekends, or yeah, well, actually, usually every Friday, I would go to the library and I'd sit down and I would take one of the practice tests, kind of, but treat it like a real exam.
Mhm.
So I would take it. I remember my exam was at 11 a.m. On a Friday. So every Friday I would show up to the library at 11 a.m., put my phone away, and kind of take it like it was the real thing.
Mhm.
Because I think that developing that endurance for the exam is really key to doing well. Because when you've already been sitting there for like 4.5 hours, it's really tough to get through those last few questions. But if you power through and you train like that, you're going to perform like that. So that's why I kind of took that plan of action.
I don't know if you remember, but I've heard that like the scores that you test on your practice test on DAT Bootcamp, they're normally like 1 or 2 points lower than what you usually get on the actual DAT. Did you have that same experience?
Yeah, so I scored, I think, 2 or 3 points higher than what I was scoring consistently on the DAT bootcamp exams. And I don't know, sometimes I probably scoured Student Doctor Network for like hours and hours on end, trying to see if that was true, trying to find the evidence. But I think that also another factor that comes into play is when you get to the exam, you're kind of in a state of mind where it's like nothing else matters. This is what counts right now. And you get into that like athletic mindset where you go and perform. And I
Mhm.
think that may realistically be what differentiates between the scores you might get on the real exam versus on the DAT bootcamp exams.
Okay, that's interesting.
But but I do think that they're super comparable. I felt like the questions that I was getting tested on through bootcamp were very comparable to the real exam that I took, and that's why I felt prepared when I took the real exam.
And here's something else I was wondering. Did you ever see like a question on the DAT that you were like, wow, DAT Bootcamp didn't have this, or everything was covered?
That's a tough one because DAT bootcamp just has like hundreds of problems,
Yeah.
and it just could have been something like I felt like I just didn't memorize enough or I just forgotten. So that's a tough question. To be honest, I think that DAT bootcamp is very well representative of the whole test. I went on, I actually only used because in the DAT bootcamp, there's like the biology, the full textbook, and then there's like the concise textbook, I think.
Yeah.
I just used the concise one and I treated it like study guides for an exam, tried to memorize as much as I could. And I ended up doing very well in the science section. So I feel like those science sections, as talked about in the boot camp, are well representative of what you might see on the actual exam.
And so you did better on the science section. So what happened during like the reading comprehension and math? Do you think you should supplement that with other resources?
Reading comprehension, to be honest, I didn't really study a whole lot for that one just because I felt, my reading comprehension is already pretty good. And so I did pretty decent in that section. The one, it's interesting. The one section I struggled with was math. That was my lowest section.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's because I just didn't spend enough time studying it prior to the exam. Like I was, so focused on OChem, Biogen Chem, and doing well in those sections that I kind of put it on the back burner. Um, but truthfully, I think that if I had taken more time to do all of the boot camp quantitative reasoning questions, it probably would have helped me a little bit better. Because, in my opinion, the math section is all about learning the tips and tricks for getting through those problems. And that's why that's what I would say for that. I did fairly well too in the perceptual ability, and
Mhm.
I attribute that to the DHT bootcamp solution that they provided, where you spend basically you do like 10 questions a day from each section every day,
Mhm.
and it's, you knock out a little bit of the time. And I started to realize as I got further and further along in my studying that like the problems just came so quick, one after another. Even the angle ranking, that seems impossible at times, but after you've done a few hundred of them, you look at it and you're like, I know those angles are correct, and you use the tricks that they give you, and that's what makes it beneficial, in my opinion.
Okay, very cool. So obviously you scored well on your DAT and then you got an interview at UOP. Can you walk us through a little bit about that on that day, like what you were feeling, who interviewed you and like the overall like feeling of the interview?
Yeah, definitely. So I had a post December interview. It was in January, end of January. And I remember UOP does a cool thing because most of the interviews I received were like via email, but UOP's was actually like a phone call. So they called you, they tell you you have an interview, welcome you to come. It's super exciting. I flew to San Francisco one day before, got ready for my interview. And the day was, super awesome. The school was bustling. This is before COVID. So
Mhm.
I had the pleasure of seeing kids working in the sim lab. I got to see, kids running around doing study groups, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the day was spent basically talking to the admissions director, talking to the admissions counselors about where we were in the process and everything about the school history, mindset, curriculum. We got to learn about the academic portion, which is obviously very important at UOP because it's 3 years. So you kind of want to understand what you're getting into before you go there.
Mhm.
And then I had an interview with an oral surgery faculty at UOP. It was very, in my opinion, comfortable. We sat down in a normal study room, and I felt very at home. It wasn't him grilling me. He kind of just went on with, how are you? Tell me about yourself. And it was, those questions can be super intimidating at times because it's like, how do you even open up about yourself? But
Yeah.
it was kind of put me in, because of how at ease he was, it kind of put me at ease. And we ended up just talking about everything that I'd done up until this point since my last application, since I thought that was probably the most worthwhile thing to talk about.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also got to meet with a student. It was not so much an interview, I'd say, it's more of like an introduction to student life at UOP. He wanted to know what I was like. I wanted to know what the students at UOP were like. And that was super helpful, I think, into kind of my decision as well. Was I got to see what it was really like to be a student there from his perspective, and that was helpful. And then, yeah, the rest is history. I felt really good coming out of it. It wasn't one of those interviews where I felt like I had just gotten grilled and it was super exhausted and tired. I felt rejuvenated, and, it got me really excited about UOP and wanting to go there. So, yeah.
Very cool. So here's something that I'm wondering is like sometimes at the interviews they'll ask you, "Do you have any questions for us?" What kind of questions did you ask on that day? Like without
That
sounding, basic, right?
Yeah, and it's tough. I actually spent a lot of time brainstorming different questions because even beyond dental school, that's an important interview skill to have for jobs and for anything beyond as well. The kind of questions that I was interested in was about the 3-year rigor and about the 3-year program. I talked about how I had done that program at USC, and I wanted to know, how do students do traditionally, and then do they also have a social life or an ability to kind of hang out with each other and form those bonds?
Mm.
Because it's a big undertaking to be able to undergo that and have that be part of your curriculum. So I asked about student life. I asked about, how the 3-year curriculum impacts that student life. And then I asked about the clinical experiences at the school. I think when you go into dental school, it's important to kind of have an idea of where you want to be afterwards in
Mhm.
regards to if you want to specialize, if you want to be a general practitioner, et cetera. Because I think that by asking about the clinical experiences, you can kind of see where you're going to be in your skill level. I mean, obviously, everyone's different. Everyone learns at a different speed. But you can kind of gauge based on your own inherent knowledge of yourself where you're going to be with what the school can provide. And that's a super important piece for kids going in because, you're investing a lot of money in this and you want to go to a school that's going to build you up and make you a proficient dentist or specialist or whatever you want to go into.
So I'm assuming clinical like expertise was one of the reasons you chose UOP. Are there any other reasons that UOP stood out to you, and what do you think makes UOP unique compared to other dental schools?
I'd have to say I have a few family members that also went to UOP, and they were a big factor in me wanting to go there because they always talked about how close the Dugoni family is and how close the UOP family is as a whole. And when I went there for my interview, I felt like I saw that in real life of what it always seemed abstract to me. And so being there really helped me gauge, these are people that are here to build you up. The whole like humanistic approach to dentistry is to hold yourself accountable ethically and have good work ethic and to be constructive and critical of yourself so that you can elevate yourself to another level. And you can't do that by yourself. You do that with strong faculty, strong other students around you, strong mentors. And I felt like UOP provided that. In regards to building me as a dentist and building the Dugoni family that I wanted to be a part of. So, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be a really prominent factor. Like the Dugoni family is a reason that like is one of the reasons that every student chooses Dugoni, it seems like. And yeah, it's awesome that that resonates with you as well. So how has your transition been from like being a pre-dent to finally being a first year at Dugoni, and like how has COVID affected that?
It's surreal. It's definitely not how I expected dental school to start or pictured it ever being like this in my head. But, it's funny. I think everything happens for a reason. And I can tell you that a lot of my classes at USC were actually online. A lot of them were behind a computer screen. And I almost feel like that it heavily prepared me for the kind of situation we're in now. So the first thing people always ask is, how's it been doing, Zoom University? How's it been doing dental school online for a lecture? And, it can be tough, there's not that same physical interaction that you get when you're in person in a lecture hall. But because I think I had that background from my master's program, it helped me really get accustomed to doing online learning. And you know what? I found it to be very beneficial because I'm not the kind of person that can just learn things the first time right when I listen to them. And because of the online learning platform, when the lectures get recorded, I have this opportunity to not only pause, slow down, but also rewind and rewatch things I didn't understand the first time.
Mm.
And I almost feel like instead of having to try to relearn things 2, 3, 4 times, I can do it in one sitting and get it done at one point. I wouldn't say it's easier per se, but I'd say it really helps with the time management of the whole thing. And so, that's one of the benefits of being COVID and also being in dental school, I guess, at this point.
And do you feel like UOP is still keeping you at a very high standard, or like?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
I think that like in the sim lab, I tried to go back and see the number of and this is in regards to hand skills.
Yes.
I was trying to see like, the amount of practicals that the classes before us took. You can't really access that information, but I was talking to some of my faculty and a lot of them say that we're doing, near the same number of practicals and they're scoring them just as hard. And so I feel like with where we're getting at right now, UOP has still been able to hold us to a stellar standard while also being able to conform to the health standards set by the San Francisco Department of Public Health, which not only shows to me that they're invested in the student body, but they're invested in trying to maintain good infection control, healthy people in the clinics, healthy students on campus. And that's what means the most to me, especially during COVID. So I've really enjoyed that. And they really vouch for us in terms of like, because people always ask too, how is the amount of practice versus, past years or so? In the beginning it was tough. the San Francisco Department of Public Health really was, I feel like, limiting how much time we got there. But as the school vouched for us more and more, we started getting evening practice times, which opened up to weekend practice times. And we started getting our skill level higher and higher by practicing more, which I felt like was a very strong suit of the school on their part to do that and get us to the level that we are today, going into our almost our second year.
That's very cool. So they advocated for you guys a lot. Something I was wondering is, so at UOP, you guys are ranked, right? And you guys have, you're graded. So how does that work with, you guys are also known for having like that Dugoni family. Do you think those two ever clash, or like, are you guys always collaborative and helping each other out when you're preparing for your
You know,
exams?
that's an excellent question. And I think about that. I thought about that a lot when I was a pre-dent because in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, if it's ranked and people are competing against specialties, how do people act in a collaborative nature, you know?
Yeah.
And when I got here, I kind of had that, kind of set as my mindset, but I found it to be totally false. We have like our group chats that we, talk about organizing study groups with, and everyone is really good at sharing notes. We have like an entire Google Drive we have like a class webmaster that puts together a schedule for all of us that has like, when we have exams, when we have practice times, when we have class. We also have people uploading their Quizlet decks and study guides. So, that for a school that has ranking and grades, it is one of the most collaborative kind of organizations I've ever been a part of. And I think that's what's relational to that Dugoni family is that even though we're competing, probably mostly against ourselves to get as good grades that we can, we're still helping lift each other up to that next level. And that's what makes it a great institution, in my opinion.
That's very cool. And do you feel like COVID has made it difficult for you guys to get to know each other, or have you guys just gone through that obstacle and like you guys are already the family that you guys, talk about?
At the beginning, it was definitely tough because we weren't on campus as much, and we weren't hanging out with each other outside of school because of COVID. And no one had been vaccinated, no one had been getting tested, and so we didn't get to know as many people. But as the school year has gone on, and we've been cleared to do more preclinical education in the school, we've gotten so much closer with our pods. And pods basically for our kind of how we're divided in the school. Uh, we kind of get grouped in with kids that have not similar last names, alphabetically similar last names. And so you do all of your preclinical education essentially with them, and you form like a little close knit pod family. And we've gotten a lot closer since we've all started going back to school more. And yeah, so it's been fun. I wouldn't say I know everyone in my class yet, just because there is that barrier that exists because of COVID in a lot of regards. But I hope that as we get back to school, it improves a lot more, and we're able to get more close knit with the entire class versus just half or a quarter or 3/4 having that.
And has your school given an update for when you guys will be back in person, or like what it's going to look like in the fall?
That I am unsure on. I remember President Callahan, who's the president of like all of University Pacific, Stockton, Sacramento, San Francisco,
Mhm.
saying uh, something along the lines of wanting to get back soon. But the San Francisco campus, hasn't told us exactly what's going on, or I missed the email and I just don't know yet. But I'm hoping so. I really hope that we go back to full capacity soon. I think they said 97% of our campus is fully vaccinated. So that sounds promising to me. And hopefully that it plays well for the future of our incoming class and us as we move forward in our schooling.
Okay. So my final question for you is, if you could give yourself some advice from like when you were pre-dent, what would you say?
I would,
That's a hard question. Sorry, but
no. It's totally good. And I would tell myself, you know, take your time. When I was an undergrad, I was so obsessed with trying to get through the system as fast as I could, try to get through the application, take my DAT, etc. And I felt like rushing it and trying to get through everything as fast as I could was my greatest downfall in my application when I applied the first time. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older and I took time to really study and really take my time with everything that I realized I was truly ready for the next step of going to dental school. And so for all the pre-dental students out there that, are 18, 19, 20, 21 that are about to graduate undergrad and they want to get to the next step as fast as they can because they see it all over social media and whatnot, take a deep breath and relax. You'll get there when you're supposed to be, and don't stress it. You'll get there as long as you keep trying. That's what I would tell them.
That is a great bit of advice. Darius, thank you so much for your time today. If our viewers have any like additional questions for you, is it possible they can reach out through either like email or social media?
Most definitely. I can share my Instagram with you guys. It's just my personal IG. It's at Darius Tenorio, or I can give you my email. It's a little bit weird combo of characters and words. Maybe you can put it in the video somewhere.
Yeah, that's fine. You don't have to say it verbally. We'll put it in
Okay.
the description as always. For everyone at home, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to be notified when we upload new content, hit the notification bell. If you have any questions for us at FutureDDS, you can just DM us on Instagram at _FutureDDS, and we'll try to reply as soon as possible. And until next time, we'll see you all then.
Thanks.